So in our final session of the day, again, we're going to talk about international matters and things of any tangents that may come up. Since we have a few relatively persons from the Archimedes membership who haven't been on previous panels today, I thought we'd do some brief self-introductions. I think just what I'll be doing, we'll start with Jason, go to Uma. If Nancy's available, switch to Nancy, and then we'll start up again. So, Jason, would you mind giving an introduction to yourself and a little bit about Baxter?
Sure. First off, can you hear me? It's my first time talking. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for including me in this panel. It's a great honor to be here and talk about these topics. My name is Jason Shutt. The brief intro is 14 years into cybersecurity in various roles. What's relevant to this group is my first 4 years in the industry were as a network security analyst at a hospital network. I've spent the last 8 years now and across the MDM space. Currently at Baxter, I am a global product security compliance lead, which within the organization, that means that I own the compliance function, the process around it, and then the execution. I've also expanded into being a guest auditor for internal audits to help measure the maturity of the execution of the process, as well as a certified trainer in our learning management system to train on the process, as well as talent development within the product security space within the organization. Baxter has a wide portfolio, of everything from fusion pumps to the beds and across the board. So that's where we sort of sit. So we have a lot of varied devices, be it cloud platform, hardware, embedded, all those kind of things. So we're always happy to hear these topics of the day because it hits us in different directions throughout the day. So thanks for having the sessions as well.
Thanks for joining, Jason. Why don't we turn to Uma?
Hi there. First of all, thanks very much for having me on this panel as well. And what a fantastic day, Kevin and team. I mean, really a fantastic day. So I'm hoping that we learn even more from all of us together here. So my name is Uma Chandrashekhar, a relatively new member at the Archimedes Council. And overall, I would say my background, first of all, is in electrical engineering. I have been primarily in the what I would call security space for eons, more than I can count. But it's beginning with the whole product life cycle, from requirements, testing, to interoperability, to looking across connected systems, really in the telecom industry. Then I felt telecom has gotten to a point where it's very mature and nearly need to do the same for healthcare. And so I navigated myself into healthcare, and now I lead. So I've been in a couple of healthcare companies, and I currently lead the global product security program within Alcon. What Alcon does is primarily, I'm sure all of you have had to deal with either some sort of eye ailment or have a family member who has had an eye ailment. We are a niche provider with basically addressing all pretty much major eye ailments. Most people will have gone through a cataract surgery or so, and we make those devices as well that help surgeons, clinical staff actually perform those, surgeries. So pleasure to be here and looking forward to the dialogue.
Great. Thank you. And we're going to do a little bit of microphone, speaker, hot potato, because Nancy and I are in the same room, and we're going to see what happens here. So I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Nancy to introduce herself.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Awesome. I am Nancy Brainerd. I come from Medtronic, based out of the Twin Cities. I've been at Medtronic for almost 26 years now. Primarily, bulk of my career was more on the IT cybersecurity space. But as you're all very well aware, medical devices kind of came into the forefront about 15 years ago or so. So Medtronic, we've been working very hard to stay in line with that, make sure that we are trying to lead from the front there with some of that medical device security initiative standards, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of years ago, I transitioned fully over to the product security side. So I actually report into our corporate quality organization, and we support our R&D functions on the cybersecurity of our medical devices versus instead of focusing on the IT side of the house. So I love it. I feel like I'm finally at the adult table, which is a really cool place to finally be sitting. And then just really enjoy the industry engagement and advocacy. Archimedes. I'm actually on the board of Health ISAC. We're very active within the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council as well. So this is probably my favorite part of this job is the industry engagement. So happy to be here.
Okay, we're going to do the switch. Go. Okay. This is quite the audio hot potato. So, and now we're going to turn to Soundharya, then Jack, just for some people may be joining who weren't here this morning to see you. So if you don't mind a brief introduction about yourself and your organization. Soundharya first.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. So I've been here since the beginning of the day, and it's been a fantastic day. So happy to be here and talk with all of you. So my name is Soundharya Nagasubramanian. I'm a VP of Digital and Connectivity at Vapotherm. So I lead product security, but that's in addition to all digital development. So I have this interesting role, which allows me to see, the challenges, but also help solve them maybe. So I have about 20 years, 25 years in medical device, but the last 20 or so in medical device security. So I used to work for Baxter before as global director of product security before I joined Vapotherm. And I've been member with Archimedes. So when FDA first came out with their guidance, I think Kevin Fu is like my first stop, in terms of understanding, hey, Kevin, what do we do with this?
Because not for my coffee, because I thought it was going to be for my coffee blend, Conficker coffee.
So happy to be here and engage with the industry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Jack.
Jack Kufahl. I'm the CISO for Michigan Medicine, which is the academic medical center at the University of Michigan. It's about 11 hospital system, and with our medical school and other entities, about $8 billion all in, about 2,000 beds-ish all in. So big, not giant, plenty of issues.
All right. Maybe HDO should be measured in issues per patient or something.
Mm-hmm.
But and is that larger than staff per provider? But I got to know your ratios. Okay. But in all seriousness, why don't we get down to business on international issues? And so and I'm really curious, Jack, if you're what kind of perspectives you're going to have here, since Michigan's obviously in Michigan, which is in I forget which country, but so there's the joke that's gone around for years: if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. If you look at regulations, you see one country, you've seen one country. Every country is a little bit different. We do have, for those of you on attendees who are not familiar with the regulatory frameworks, there is a body called the IMDRF, the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, and they, in my view, they reduce. They start with some common denominators, so there's less uncertainty. There will always be differences from countries, right? Because they're different sovereign territories, but it, in a sense, tries to bring together some commonality. Like, what's the definition of a vulnerability? Wouldn't it be nice if every country had the same or close to definition, so that you don't have to create 300 different products? And so this is a free a toss-up. Anyone's welcome to just unmute. Although, Nancy, if you unmute, you have to signal me so we don't get the feedback about any of your perspectives on challenges for meeting international cybersecurity regulations and pathways forward. And then on the provider side, Jack, I am kind of curious if you come into some of these issues with internationalization, especially since I imagine you have vendors from all over the world. Maybe it's in the opposite direction, but I'll give a toss up now to see who can tell us a little bit about some of the approaches you take for international issues when you sell your products to multiple countries for cybersecurity. Silence. That's what I thought.
I
Then
can
I'm going
take a run at this if you want.
okay, Jason, you go for it.
Yeah, so it's something that we're working through currently with some roadmap items this year. But what we've identified is a lot of lessons we learn when we see things like a one trust assessment for privacy is that where you're doing business and or where you want to go, what does that mean? So what we're working through is that today we have a controls catalog that maps to some standards we find are commonalities, and that's through a partnership internally with our certifications team and our regulatory team and things like that. And we're trying to solve that is expand upon that within a third party platform where if a company, I'm sorry, a product team decides we want to do business in this region or we want to do this or that, we're trying to find a way to bring those requirements or those standards to the forefront, right to the teams in a palatable way. Because right now it's in a truth be told, a spreadsheet where we map to control language and things like that map to a standard or two. So our current roadmap is to formalize that in an application that gives those requirements to the R&D teams, for example, and then our certifications team, which manages our standards mappings, we can manage that from the back end then if there's an update or a change. So we're trying to be a little more intuitive on that front to try and get ahead of this as we plan if we want to do expansion of business or new product development or whatever the case may be. So we're trying to approach it from that proactive stance of being strategic with what's coming down the pike. So that's what we're looking at, today is that how do we get that in the hands of the people making those decisions and what's the right steps next?
Kevin, if I can answer that as well.
Sure.
Sure. So I think, so first of all, it's a great point about IMDRF. I mean, IMDRF does a great job of sort of getting to that harmonization where we have so many different regulatory bodies that are working together to come up with some sort of document that really sort of brings everything together. There's like the legacy one, there's SBOM, there's also just general definition of cyber. And what do we mean from a cyber perspective? So from our perspective, I mean, just to the point that was brought up by Jason, one of the things, I mean, we tried to do is look at it from the highest level of requirements. Ultimately, the set of security controls will be there in most of these regulatory bodies, but at different levels. And there's always going to be what I'm going to say, this standardized, boilerplate of requirements that will have to be there. And those, I think the complexity is depending on the product, which requirements apply, and then again, the risk associated with that and what you decide to determine how you implement. So our program actually takes these things into consideration. We've actually created a regulatory map that actually has all the different where we sell, where we actually look at all these different standards and regulations and make sure that the requirements are following those. The biggest challenge I would say is keeping up to date. And this is something and the harmonization. So, but to me, this is key because that's where you begin with that security by design. You begin with where the source is, and also, of course, customers, where do they need to be able to get that information. So our requirements have to be baked, solid upfront.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going to pass the mic right now to Nancy.
Okay. Two thoughts on this topic. So what I've seen kind of, I guess, as gaps internally is, first of all, just even identifying whether or not we are in scope for that new regulation or not. Something will come out about cloud in Europe or the UK or whatever, but then there's a little teeny tiny clause in there that says exempting medical devices. And so it's being very careful about making sure you're looking at the fine print. Secondly, when we talk about going to market in different regions with medical devices, I mean, there are very strict regulatory, gates and approvals and different things like that for medical devices. I think where we struggle, maybe this is a little bit of inside baseball, and I'd love some feedback on this, is the post-market side of bringing a device, to a customer. Do you have an ISO 27001 certification? Do you have the certification in Germany that you need, to be able to sell there? And I think internally, we see our regulatory groups don't look at that post-market stuff because it's not specific to medical device. And so it's a struggle. We get through the process, we get it approved, and then it's like, oh crap, we can't sell it because we don't have an ISO certification on this thing that we need. So that's I think a bit of a disconnect that we got to figure out how to work through, the connecting the pre-market to the post-market requirements of getting a device into a customer's hand.
If I can add
Go
a
for it.
couple of thoughts there. I think generally on the product, the pre-market side, what we found is, along the lines of what's been said before, there's been a lot of adoption with the IEC 81001-5-1, I think was mentioned earlier as well. That seems to be like gaining the most traction. At least, like everybody wants to know, are you compliant with that? And if you are, then you've got, most of the things covered. So between the FDA's guidance, 81001-5-1, and IMDRF, you kind of cover your bases, right? Or at least it seems so. And then the post-market one, which Nancy was talking about, is very, very relevant because you do need to do the certifications, and that's where if you have cloud products, then you need to do SOC 2 or high trust, and then you've got the ISO 27001, which is more of a program. So now you've got more requirements on the post-market side to kind of be, being able to sell and being able to, the customer trusts it better. So you got to cover both the pre and the post-market. And I think the pre-market is natural for all the medical device vendors because that's what they do, right? It's in the QMS, they do it. Post-market, needs more work. But I think that, the challenge on the post-market side is not one, right? It's for different parts of the globe, it's different. And each of them require annual certification and the upkeep of it.
Great. So I wanted to see if Jack, I'm curious, does an individual provider, an HTO, come into international issues? And if not, I want to pivot to things more in the AI space, but I'm curious if you have any there.
Some depends on the nature of it, depends on the nature of the medical device, depends on the nationality or the residence of the patient. One thing that may be a little bit of a bunny trail, but I think about when we talk about the medical device pre and post market, but there is an increasing call for the data interoperability and the data flows out of these devices. And the rules and regulations around what happens with that data and what it interoperates with. It's not just an interesting international issue, because there's no problems like Swiss problems, but the other issue is in the U.S., right, into the 54 states and territories. The privacy laws, especially around consumer and healthcare privacy laws, are really starting to interact that data flow, data use, appropriate use, and those are coalescing into three large bodies of privacy laws, but distinctly at odds with each other. So a patient from Oregon has very different expected rights as a citizen of Oregon than a patient of Michigan or a patient of Missouri. And these are becoming extraordinarily complex for managing the medical device information that may become part of the record and pertain to the residency of a particular state. So it's not necessarily the international issue for us in the system of systems, but also those local 54 states and provinces type idea. And I think that data use idea plays directly into what are we going to do about that AI stuff?
Yeah. Well, we're going to pivot to AI in just a moment. So for the panelists to start thinking, we're going to surely get into a discussion on AI tools for improving cybersecurity, and then AI tools for, you can think of it as pen testing or offensive, as well as workforce development. But before we move there, I want to share just one international provider-oriented story, and that was a colleague of mine works attending physician in electrophysiology. This is the lab that puts pacemakers in, and I learned that a certain large cardiac implant company, if a patient happened to have gotten their implant in Mexico and then comes to the U.S. for treatment, the programmers don't work with it, and none of the physicians know why, but they just sort of try to flag if a patient comes from a certain country to sort of do something different, or say like we can't help you on that. But anyhow, so there are strange international issues, and I'm kind of curious if it might have to do with some, standards in different countries. But pivoting to the AI space, and again, this can be a toss-up. There's a lot of interesting things going on. So on the regulatory side, FDA has guidances at various stages related to safe and effective use of AI in medical devices. And then within organizations, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any organization that's not using generative AI for something. Sometimes not even wittingly. It might be you might be unwittingly using it. And it's really sneaking into every corner of life. And I'd be really interested to hear from any of our members here how AI is being used, or thoughts on your mind about what could be done better to in a future where there is more AI inside of medical devices, whether it be for machine learning or whether it be some kind of natural language processing, whether it be like analyzing chart data. But how can we ensure that it is managed in a way that is promoting the safety and effectiveness? And it might differ from what federal agencies are doing. But I'm curious to hear any thoughts from our members on this, either about what you're doing or effective approaches you've seen.
I guess I'll go again first. Sorry, Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, from our point of view, there's a deep interest in AI in clinical decision support workflows and other operational areas, like asking AI to tell us just what the heck our policies actually say. But in the clinical space, one of the things that I think would help, and one of the areas that we have more confidence, whether it's self-developed or commercial large language model utilization, are transparency. And S-bombs speak to that, but actually R-bombs are becoming more and more interesting to us, so we can watch real-time interactions and what might be truly impactful, what might be truly meaningful from a threat landscape. So if we can see what's operating in the runtime and not just what version of Struts grad student accidentally left in there, is really useful to look for abnormal behavior.
EXPN RS bombs, Jack. For those of you who are not familiar, could you explain your dialect of S-bomb you were just referring to?
Our bombs are what all the cool kids are talking about now, because we begged for S-bombs and then we got them. And then we said, oh my God, what do I do with all this inventory data, to which we already had no solution. So our bombs help us because that's what's actually running. Like, that's what's loaded into the memory. That's what the app is actually using, or the large language model is actually using. And it's a smaller list of things that are actually using processor time in RAM that are actively being used. I'm not here to cast stones at software developers, but they're pretty awful human beings. And so actually seeing what's running and not just what's being listed as running is useful to a CISO.
We're all electrical engineers here who just write software.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know my audience. Yeah.
Spaghetti code. Okay. I think I saw Jason.
You take your vibe coding and you keep on the Eastern Seaboard. Stay out of the Midwest with your vibes.
I let go of the entire system integration team, and I hired these vibe coders. Okay, but yeah, Jason.
Yeah, I have I guess a slightly different angle on the topic, because obviously when you work at an MDM, your door's knocked off of AI vendors trying to sell you this, sell you that. So where I'm at with owning a process is trying to derive requirements, outcomes, things like that, where we can operationalize it. And the way I'm trying to approach that in the evaluation space is in the weird sense of starting at the end. When you ask about like what decisions you're going to make, what your desired outcome is, I think you can work backwards a little bit, because what I learned in doing some privacy study on AI about, when you hear things about bias and poisoning of data, or even the Microsoft recently talking about where you can influence outcomes based on prompt poisoning and things like that. What I always come down to is, when you know what your desired outcome is, you can work back to find out, to one, how to validate a vendor, to understand if you're going to get the right outcomes initially, and then having that benchmark throughout to ensure from a security standpoint, you're still testing in those outcomes. You have your benchmarks and use cases. So that's what we're wrestling with right now, is the ability to standardize our data sets, to get manual outcomes where we understand them, to implement AI to show, well, hey, this is our expected outcome. We're getting that from an AI tool, and how to validate that throughout its life cycle, meaning the AI life cycle, because we don't want to get a false sense of security from AI where it made a good decision on day one, but by day 3001, we could be having adverse moments. So, as a process level thinker, that's where I'm at, is when we know what our outcome is, we know what our criteria are, we try and meet in the middle for a plan to not only implement or select, but validate throughout.
Yeah.
I think I see Soundharya. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, I mean, there's obviously a lot of interest in how we can leverage AI, different parts of the organization, not just product development, but, organizational efficiency and so on and so forth. On the product side, there are some useful, NLP type of applications that we could use, which will allow for patients to interact with the devices, in a better way. Speaking to it instead of having to enter the answer, right? And being able to answer the questions, especially if you want, web-based products or, interactions with the digital side that are of interest. But, we are more, I would say, looking at those type of standards. And the IMDRF has a framework that sounds very interesting to me. So we are in the exploratory phase of how we could use it, to build into our products. And at the same time, there's I know the FDA has put out, their view on AI products, but when you go for an FDA 510(k) submission, how will that impact the submission? That's still a question that we are exploring.
Hey, so another thing to add is, and I know that Greg spoke earlier today, unfortunately I couldn't join that, but there at the HSCC, there's a task group working on AI, and specifically there's a subgroup working on security by design for where AI is either embedded in a product or part of the ecosystem. So when we think about that, I mean, we all know the Joint Security Plan, where it lists out all the 2.0 lists out all of the security deliverables. What I think is really important for now is to think about, first of all, defining what type of AI are we talking about? Are we talking about autonomous? Are we talking about, is it just we're using it to just get one time and it's not learning and so on? So the risks associated with that versus autonomous are very different. And therefore, what deliverables we need throughout that JSP, what needs to change? What do we need to do differently? How do we update that to then now support future learning models and things like that? So I think that's where at least we are focusing on making sure that we understand that well enough and be much more proactive and build those things earlier in your program so that anything you build going forward takes those into consideration.
Well, before we change to some other the topics we've got planned in workforce development and a little bit on microsegmentation, since we brought up HSCC, one AI story, and that is if you try typing in just what time is it to an NLP AI chatbot, you're probably not going to get a very satisfying response. And so I sometimes wonder, wow, do I really want clinical advice from a software program that can't tell me what time it is? Or it'll say oh, let me help you find some websites that can answer that question for you. And then I just look at my watch, really? You can't tell me what time it is? Oh yeah, Ken Hoyme, of course, the Archimedes court gesture points out, oh yeah, what time would you like it to be? Let's see, coin flip, microsegmentation, workforce development. One is a smaller topic, microsegmentation. So HSCC is standing up some working groups related to microsegmentation, and it's kind of a naughty word to some extent. And I think this might be more into Jack's area if you've got any strong opinions on this. But I also have a feeling that manufacturers probably have some assumptions about microsegmentation. So this is a type of firewalling, basically, in my view. But Jack, do you have any thoughts you want to share on either microsegmentation or when a manufacturer says something like, hey, here's our device, it'll be fine as long as you put it on a secure hospital network.
Yeah. I mean, it's
not that our members would never have done that, right? So no one here would have ever done that.
From the MDM point of view, it's not bad advice. If you were to corner any type of doctor at a cocktail party and say, "Hey, doc, I'd like to be healthier," she's going to say, "Well, exercise, don't smoke, and eat more greens." Right? It's good all-purpose advice that's not going to hurt you. So when an MDM says, "Put it on a secure hospital network or microsegment," it's like, I agree. I should definitely eat more salad. However, I think the reality is that the network engineer, sort of like the CCNP network engineer playbook for network segmentation is antithetical to the hospital environment because of data flow and interoperability. I think that was true 10 years ago. I think it's true now, right? So you can microsegment, or you could even do on-the-fly software-defined microsegmentation, but segments are only valid as a security measure if they're not permissible. And hospitals need data to flow internally through its other health systems to other entities. So microsegmentation and data flow are often at odds. And when they're not at odds, they require an extraordinary investment in human time and technology. And I don't know if that's the best investment. One of the ways that we're approaching a segmentation strategy at Michigan Medicine is not, here is a segment for this building or this floor or this type of device, but to look at it as risk pools, right? As circles of trust, if you will. So here's a segmentation of highly confident, highly trusted systems that have met this rigor, can interoperate very seamlessly with a lot of permissibility. Here's this other risk pool that is somewhere moderate, and here's the island of misfit toys. Here's this thing where the vendor said can't be patched and there's nothing wrong with Windows NT, right? And just keep running Windows NT and you'll be fine. And it's got to be able to do EEGs from one hospital over the wire to another hospital to get the data there. We're going to put that in a high risk pool. So we're starting to look at segmentation in a risk pool orientation. It helps drive a conversation of behaviors with clinical engineering, with vendors, with providers, right? To be able to say, look, if you need that level of interoperability, you're going to have to meet this trust barrier with these other highly confident systems. But that doesn't mean that I can just throw it out, because it may be providing, and if they can't do it, I still need a way of providing some level of connectivity. I can't devote network engineering, system security engineer time, architecture time, monitoring availability time for all of these different segments, because probably the best way of doing it is through ACLs. I mean, I know there's whiz-bang products out there, but ACLs are basically first in, first out, Boolean logic. And we've seen some radiology access control lists off of our switches and routers that, would just make your eye water with complexity. And you just can't maintain them. And that in of itself becomes an availability issue, right? A change management availability issue. So this risk pooling idea is the direction we're going to. And, so far early results are pretty good. Observability is better. The human behavior conversation is better. And we're able to preserve from connectivity and still interact with our vendors in at least 16 shades of gray and not just a black and white sort of equation. So
I want to ask then for other panelists, we've got a couple options here. We could talk about workforce development, but if you'd like to continue on this discussion of microsegmentation, happy to do that as well.
Oh, actually, just sorry on that point. We actually coined a phrase at Michigan Medicine, so patent pending. It's mesosegmentation, right? It's not micro, it's mesosegmentation.
Okay. All right.
I have one brief comment on this topic, and then if nobody else wants to keep going, we can move on. Okay. But if I go back to my network security analyst days, to piggyback on some things that Jack said, there was the network I worked at. We had to do a PCI compliance audit of the cafeteria, and we realized everybody was on the same network. If you know PCI compliance audits, whatever's on your PCI network is in scope. So we had a very come to Jesus kind of moment of, well, what are we after as we segment? And what the initial slice was the cafeteria by itself for PCI purposes, the biomed device is separated from enterprise for obvious security purposes and its data sensitivity. It started there, but it was a constant question we would ask is, what is the benefit or what is the need for the segment? And sometimes within those bigger segments, you had stories about, well, the cancer center, for example, is so sensitive, that's its own VLAN unto itself. It's isolated, that way. So it was an interesting discussion when you talk about network topology and risk versus reward, like Jack had said. For us, I have that anecdotal thing of what are we trying to solve? And it started with, we can't audit the entire network for PCI. So it started there and worked our way that way. But it was a very tangible discussion with our network team about what's the benefit for the segment, what's the gain. But that was, in my experience, the first pass was a good enterprise assets, payment card assets, and biomed assets was our first, almost like three-pronged swipe and work from there.
Okay. Well, thanks for those comments. So in our last 5 minutes or so, I want to wrap up with the topic of workforce development. It's always challenged to do hiring, and in academia, we train students to be the junior people entering the beginning of their careers in computer security and medical device design. Building up a medical device security program within a manufacturer or within a provider, I imagine, is very challenging. So we could just by tradition always start with Jason, but again, we'll do a toss-up. But interested to hear how you're grokking the problem when you need additional workforce development, or either bringing in new hires or working with an employee. Maybe you have an employee who's a gifted medical device designer, but doesn't have a degree in security engineering, and you effectively teach them some of the techniques to bring them up to speed to complement their other expertise. So I'll make it again a toss-up, and then I'll probably assume Jason's going to say I got it. But go ahead, toss up there on workforce development before we put Jason on the spot.
I'll go first, just to break the tradition that Jason goes first. So, so I'm gonna, I think that it's all of it, right? First of all, if you just bring in security engineers and you don't train the software engineers, it doesn't work well. Because then the software engineers start, saying, hey, I actually can't implement it the way you're saying. And so what I've found, in all my experiences is that it's good to have a combination, right? We do bring in product security engineers that have, more in-depth security experience. And a lot of times it might even be, someone that's come from IT and that gets trained into product security, because it's easier to find IT security than specific software engineers that have trained to become security engineers. And then in addition, what works really well is to have someone who can help train and spread the knowledge, right? So we have, those security engineers that are coming in, also helping with, training software engineers, and also providing, programs for software engineers where they can go and get security training, deploying platforms where they can go get trained on an as needed basis for specific areas. For example, encryption, what should we do? Well, don't develop your own encryption standard. That doesn't work. Go use what's there. So, those kind of things. So I think it's a hybrid approach, right? Bringing the right talent in to help, sort of kickstart and supplement at specific areas. I think security testing is a specific area where we also partner with, outside agencies. But it's an area where we do want some core strength. And then training the software engineers as a whole brings some responsibility, some ownership, right? So the software engineers feel like, oh yeah, I have to think about security as part of my job. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You also mentioned the testing. I find, at least with in the past, I find that that's one of the easiest ways for my students to get their first toehold in security engineering, as having a role on testing, because of the sort of ability to dial it up and make it more sophisticated over time. As long as you're forthcoming that, basic testing is just basic testing, but you got to start somewhere. So for instance, Northeastern, we have a co-op program. I think we're entering our 115th year or something like that. Most of the students come to Northeastern strictly because of the co-op program. And so one of the subspecialties that we're just beginning to spin up has to do with pen testing for medical devices, and I view it as the sort of the dental hygienist type of arrangement where students are doing some testing on some relatively low-risk devices, helping out manufacturers, and then a faculty member like myself come in to look over the work like the dentist just to make sure that we didn't miss a cavity. So not meant to display sophisticated pen testing, but really about career development, workforce development, and a pipeline to get future employees who have some basic training before they arrive. Back to workforce development. Soundharya took the first one there, and so that's good. We've got 4 other options now. Who wants to go next? Oh, I'm going to transfer my mic to Nancy. So just a moment when I hit my 2 buttons.
Awesome. Okay. Just a couple thoughts on this, and actually, I got a slide that I can share here. So, I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm very invested in the college pipelines and how to start grooming some of that talent and whatnot. But also, I think we've seen within our organization is the degree requirements. And I apologies to the academics in the room, but sometimes not having a degree does prohibit us from getting strong talent. And so we've been working internally around how do we identify talent outside of a degree where they have skills, they have experience, they have all the things that we need. And just because they, don't have a degree in underwater basket weaving or whatever, they're still qualified. Like let's consider them. So there's that aspect of it. I think the other challenge that we all have is we cannibalize from each other, and it's hard. We're all concentrated in specific areas around the country, and now we're constrained with, well, at least we are, with being tied to return to office and all that. So I can't go to rural Kentucky and find a really, diamond in the rough there that I can hire anymore. So that's a little bit frustrating. I had our HR teams do some research on this, and I'll just share my screen really quick. If I can find it, sorry. Ugh. Isn't that? Okay, I guess I won't. The punchline is that 0 to 10 hiring difficulty, it's a 10. Very difficult to hire. The relatively low supply, very low. It takes approximately 75 days or longer to fill a role now. And unfortunately, all of the different areas where this talent exists is very concentrated. And so again, we're cannibalizing from each other. So this is like data that I'm using to say, okay, can I please expand outside of the Twin Cities to hire, or look at other opportunities in different cities and whatnot to hire? So that's some of the different strategies that we're looking at. I'll go back on mute. Hold on.
Okay, we're so fast at this. We finally mastered the mute, and it's 5:01 p.m. Eastern. So we have run out of time. I really appreciate all the members giving their thoughts on these sort of important topics, some of the priority topics in the field. I want to give everybody just a few seconds to sort of any final thoughts before we adjourn for the day, and preemptively thank all the attendees for joining. So I'm going to go through Jason, Jack, Uma, Soundharya, and then Nancy. So Jason, any final thoughts?
My biggest takeaway from these events always is how we all come together as a unified group. I know some of us are competitors in this space and from different pillars, and I've always appreciated the way we put those weapons down, so to speak, to solve industry-wide problems. So I can't thank this panel and everybody else all day enough for the sharing of not only the stories, the lessons learned, and all those things, but solving these problems together. It's always, I have a renewed passion every time I leave one of these, and today is no different. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you, Jason. Jack?
I would echo the idea of collaboration and the importance of it that Jason mentioned. The other thing I would offer is just a thimbleful of perspective on the concept of regulations. A lot of times we talk about regulations and government burden or process bureaucracy as an overtly challenging item. When I work with other healthcare institutions in developed countries or underdeveloped countries or developing countries, that's the number one question is how do we, without those regulations, without those guidelines, without those safety nets, there isn't this great panacea of solutions, right? So I think sometimes we get myopic that the regulations are overly burdensome or challenging, but I worked inside healthcare institutions and seen it from the other side of complete lack of regulations. And it's an unfathomable job. So something to keep perspective of as we work on these together in that collaboration.
Thanks, Jack. Let's turn to Uma.
Yeah, so first of all, I think what brings us all together is that we're all interested in not just the best patient safety and but the best outcomes. And so we're so lucky, all of us, to be in this field where we can make a difference in those areas. And I would just suggest that we continue to keep plugging along. I echo what the other panelists have said. One of the things we didn't have a chance to really cover, I think the workforce development is such a big area because we want this to be, really mature. And the area that we work in will never become totally mature because there's always going to be new threats and new areas. So I think what's important is for us to spend some time looking at the evolving skill set that is needed to keep us abreast of all the things that are coming up. So I think it might be worthwhile, Kevin, just to have a separate topic on skill sets that we need as we go forward. And that's my just takeaway.
That's a great idea. And actually our next, what did I call it? 3T3ET is going to be on not necessarily hiring, but building up a cybersecurity program. But I think we should definitely do a one-on-one and some sidebars on workforce development and what can we do to help manufacturers grapple with that, and especially since we have different stages of the pipeline that we're aware of. We're obviously educating the students, guessing where they're going to be, and what you need, and we'll work with you to figure out how can we connect those dots as not just as one school, but as an entire ecosystem of universities. Let's see. Thanks, Uma. So next, Soundharya.
I echo a lot of things that have been said here, right? It's always interesting, and I feel always invigorated when I come to Archimedes. So I think the different perspectives, like hearing Jack talk about the hospital and microsegmentation and all the things that are from a different perspective, from the HGO perspective, and then Dr. Goldman from the clinician perspective versus MDM. I think that's always been a great takeaway for me, right? Like to just being able to think about the other stakeholders in the system. And then, I agree in the workforce development. I think a separate discussion would be a good next step. So thank you, Kevin.
All right, thanks. Well, we'll definitely take a note. Veronica and I will reach out to schedule some further discussions on the workforce development track. So I'm going to mute myself now and turn myself over to Nancy.
Great. The only thing I would add to all the other great comments is that I love these sessions. I think we have evolved and matured so far over the past 15 years from the defensiveness between HDOs and MDMs to a very, what I would call healthy tension, because we all have the same mission around the patient. And I think every time we come together and talk through these different challenges and how do we start to solve them in a partnership type of way, collaborative way, I think it just makes us stronger, and I'm just proud to be a part of it. So.
Okay, and I took the audio back. Well, and I also just wanted to thank again Hans Martin from Siemens Healthineers and Soundharya from Vapotherm for co-chairing and organizing speakers. We couldn't do without you, so thank you for that volunteer work and making things so much better for the community. So this concludes our Archimedes Healthcare Security Day. And thank you for the folks here who are in this one room and everybody at home from all the different time zones across the world for joining. Again, a lot of questions about how do we get the slides? How do we get the video? Bear with us as we'll be recovering and posting things on secure-medicine.org. And certainly, though, you can reach out to Archimedes at northeastern.edu if you'd like to be put on the notification list when those materials are available. So thank you all again for joining. And we'll be seeing you soon at our next 3T3 ET event. All right. See you later, everybody.
Thank you.
Mhm.